The Old School Rewind Podcast. The podcast about breakdance music.
So why is it got to be so damn tough?
Hip-hop and old school. The roots of electronic music. The Roland 808 and freestyle. This is the Old School Rewind with Randy Bubba Black on the Podcaster Online Network, Facebook.com. Search Old School Rewind and subscribe now at iTunes with all links at oldschoolrewind.com.
This week, episode 11, we've got legendary hip-hop producer, man, Parrish on the show. Stories.
You say a one for the trouble, two for the time. Come on, y'all, let's break this.
You want to know the history of dance and hip-hop? Randy Bubba Black, however you like to call me. Don't call me late for the dance or late for an interview with legendary hip-hop producer, man, Parrish. Do us a favor and search us out at iTunes and Facebook. We'd appreciate it. Subscribe, share, write, review, anything good about Old School Rewind. And show notes at oldschoolrewind.com. Let's boogie down. So, Manuel Joseph Parrish. Does anybody call you that anymore?
That's like nails on a blackboard. I hate you for saying that.
Don't hate me. I heard a guy calling you Manny throughout an interview. What do you like to be called?
That's fine. Manny's fine to friends, yeah.
Well, is Man, are you comfortable?
So the story behind Man is I used to hang out with, these people that knew Andy Warhol. And my friend Chris Makos, who was a photographer, took my picture for Interview magazine, which was Andy Warhol's magazine back in the 70s, late 70s. And they did this kind of like man about, no pun intended, guy about town or people about town. And they were looking through these proof sheets, and Andy Warhol, I was standing there, and Andy Warhol said, we can't use Manny, it's too common. He says, why don't you use Man? And I said, Man? He goes, yeah, well, I knew Man Ray, the artistic photographer, and Chris is his apprentice, so this is perfect for you to be called Man. So change it from Manny to Man, and we'll put you in the magazine. And I'm like, first of all, can I use foul language?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, I don't give a fuck, he said. I said, I don't give a fuck as long as you put me in the magazine. If you could ask Egyptian Lover how he was getting laid as a kid, I'm sure we could talk about anything.
So you enjoyed that interview, hopefully. It was a good story. What a nice guy he was. And hey, do you get laid, Egyptian Lover? And he was pretty honest. Did any of us get laid back then? I'm not so sure I was.
Yeah, I left home at 14.
Too. I'm a little tiny farm out here in Central California. I'm about an hour east of San Francisco.
That's how my name came about, and I did a couple of other things, and they said, well, what's your name? And I said, Man Parrish, and they went, okay, that's cool. And then it just stuck for the last 40 years.
I'm a 68 model, you're a 58 model. What street did you
59. Well, I grew up as a kid in one house. I grew up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Bensonhurst, Brooklyn is where Welcome Back Carter, that high school was our local high school where Saturday Night Fever was filmed. And later on, I became friends with the guy that owned the Saturday Night Fever dance club and helped him renovate it and stuff like that. But I grew up on 73rd Street and Bay Parkway in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, which was all Italian rednecks. Bensonhurst to black people was what Harlem was to white people. White kids didn't go to Harlem back then, and black guys didn't come to Bensonhurst, So it was my cuisine Italian friends that were, hey, how you doing? All mafia.
Over here. You over there? I'm over here.
Yeah, what's the matter for you? I grew up in that neighborhood, and funny, I'm doing hip-hop and, rap music, which was completely different. I grew up on rock and roll, taking acid at 14 years old. We used to go to the Academy of Music in Manhattan, and it was the only place we could buy drugs. Go down in the basement for $10 and get a hit of window pane, and we don't even care who was playing. I think we saw Janis Joplin towards the end and Jimi Hendrix and all that kind of stuff. But we would just go down because we can get acid and trip our brains out. And then I got into glam rock like David Bowie, and that led me into being more of the artistic, creative type, and that led into dance music a bit later.
You mentioned David Bowie. You're known as the David Bowie of club music around, I would say. And
I'm writing a book. One of the stories in my book is I got to go to Electric Lady Studios, and I met, let's see, my friend Cherry Vanilla used to work with David Bowie. She was his publicist, and she was doing a cabaret club show at a place called Reno Sweeney's in New York. Right around the corner was Electric Lady. And she said, somebody famous is coming in tonight. So when you're a big guy, you're 6'4", when he comes, I want you to, block off the dressing room because people are going to get excited. I'm like, who's this? It can't be David Bowie, but who could this be? Sure enough, her show ends and there's a big commotion. But she goes, go get him, go get him. And I walked out and there was a big David Bowie fan. I went, oh my God, it's David Bowie. Luther Vandross and a girl named Ava Cherry who sang backups. They went into the recording. They went into the dressing room, and after a couple of joints and a few lines of coke later, they said, "Hey, let's everybody go over to the recording studio around the corner." And I was like, "Oh, cool!" So we packed up her stuff, and he went over separately. And when we got there, we walked into the control room, and he said, "This is Luther Vandross. He's a well-known background singer in New York, and he did all the arrangements on this new song that I just did called Young Americans. Would you like to hear it? It's not even mixed." So I got to hear Young Americans before it was released off the 24 track.
Wow.
Pulled in just behind the bridge, he lays her down. He frowns, gee, my life's a funny thing. Am I still too young? He kissed her then and there. She took his ring, took his babies. It took him minutes, took her nowhere. Heaven knows he'd have taken anything. All night. She wants a young American.
Being friends with Cherry, Bowie had a townhouse on 20th Street between 7th and 8th. And Cherry said, "Hey, we've got some tickets to go to the circus. Bowie's out of town, but Angie, his wife, and his kid, and I'm going. Would you like to go?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, let's hang out with the Bowies." Sure.
Right.
So I got to see his house. We were hanging out downstairs, and Angie Bowie says to me, she says, "Cherry tells me you know all about recording and electronics." At that time, I don't have the studio I have now. I had a reel-to-reel tape recorder. I said, yeah, I know all about it. She says, "David's machine is broken. Can you go upstairs and take a look at it?" And I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I want to go like snooping around David's house. So it was a 3-story brownstone. Everybody was downstairs. And I went upstairs. I went into their bedroom. I'm looking in the underwear drawer. I'm going into the bathroom, what kind of toothbrush and toothpaste, And I got up to the top floor. It was a floor through in this brownstone. And David Bowie, I expected it to be like all silver mylar, like a spaceship, and it wasn't. It was kind of like a folk singer's house with macrame rugs and acoustic guitars and a rocking chair. And I was like, this is how David Bowie lives? Come on, you're supposed to be living like in a spaceship up here. So I got to see his house, and then later on, coincidentally, I was managed by his manager. I was a main man artist managed by Tony DeFries. So when I left my Import 12 record label, I was on Electra, and that's a whole other story. But
Yeah,
so this Bowie thing was, I've just got kind of in it over many years, through association and stuff like that. So
Hey, you left home at age 14. Why was that?
yeah, my mom was schizophrenic, but back in those days, you weren't really diagnosed as that. You were just a little weird and a little strange, and that's how mom's a little off, but things got a little rough. I'm writing a book. I don't want to give all the way, but
Okay.
I wasn't sexually abused, but I was mentally and physically abused. I mean, at one point, my mother tried to tie me to a radiator and turn up the steam to punish me. So it was fucking crazy.
I can't wait to read it in the book.
Oh, I've got lots of good dirty stories and good. Freddie Mercury tried to pick me up in a bar, and I'm like, "Who's this fucking bucktooth queen?" All my shit. I managed the Village People for 10 years. I testified against the Mafia. I performed at Studio 54, came down from the ceiling. Madonna was my opening act. At 14 years old, I was in a gay bathhouse. I saw Bette Midler, an unknown singer called Bette Midler, perform, and her piano player, who was also unknown, called Barry Manilow. So I've lived a pretty crazy life, you know what I mean? But it's all going in the book.
Hey, a Brooklyn attic. Was that where you started having a studio first? Is that home or is it somewhere else?
No, I always had a home studio. That attic in Brooklyn was actually later. So if you saw pictures of that attic, it might be online or in the Red Bull interview. I'm also in the 808 movie. That happened later because I wound up inheriting that house and renovating it. But it was literally a bedroom studio. I lived in the city in different lofts and stuff like that, and my loft was always like Grand Central for everybody in New York City, but after my record deal, I wound up on Electro Records. As I mentioned, Bowie's manager managed me, but that came to a crashing halt. He wanted me to do rock and roll. Here's David Bowie's manager, and he's saying, electronic music's never going to be anything. It's just a fad. You're wasting your time. You got to get a rock band together, slide across the stage, lick the guitar, go on tour. And I'm like, well, I really want to do electronic music. And he's like, it's never going to get anywhere. Listen to me. I'm David Bowie's manager. So I wound up getting a band together and doing some rock and roll music, and it was the most horrible thing in the world, right?
Wow.
So the record label that had signed me for hip hop, Be Bop, Boogie Down Bronx, all this electronic stuff I did, they were like, "What the fuck is this?" So they're like, "See you later." So I lost my loft, I lost my income, through the record label. I lost my manager. My mom died the day I went to Studio 54 and came down from the ceiling. We put her in the cemetery, and then I had to get in the car and go for rehearsal at Studio 54. It's insane, crazy shit. So I wound up moving back to Brooklyn, and with that came all of my old synthesizers. In those days, everything was physical. There were no plugins and computers back in those days. You had a synthesizer. It was a heavy keyboard you dragged around. So I set it up in my mom was gone. I set it up in my old bedroom in Brooklyn, and Boy George came out there. The Village People came out there. The Man-to-Man records I did. A lot of local people, Klaus Nomi, all these people came to me in Brooklyn because I had all the gear, and it, for $50 you could do a record.
How did you get all the gear? That was one of my main questions.
I told my mother at one point.
Is that another chapter for the book?
No. I mean, it's a long chapter, but I'll tell you being the comedian I am, I wanted an ARP 2600 synthesizer, and they were about $2,700. And I said to my mom, I want a synthesizer, and she's like, "You're not getting what? No way." And I said, "Mom, if you don't give me a synthesizer, I'm going to become a male prostitute, and I'm going to sell drugs, and I'm going to make the money." She said, "Hold on a second. Let me speak to your father." So my first couple of synthesizers were funded by them. Then I did porn soundtracks. I did demos, save up money for, $1,000 for a porn soundtrack. I could buy an 808 and maybe a 303, and my drums and my bass were covered. A Pro One synthesizer at $2,000 or $1,500. Another porn soundtrack and a few more demos, and I could do that. So one thing led to another, and it built up. And yes, I did become a male prostitute for about 6 months.
I was just going to say, how long did that hold you off?
It was the most hysterical thing in the world. I'm telling you. You think, I got the life. I'm a male hoe, and I'm getting paid for it. But it wasn't even the sex, and it wasn't old people or anything. It got sad really quick because most people were like lonely, and they're like, do we actually have to have sex, or can we just talk? And I went, what? I thought, I'm going to be getting laid and having fun. Well, I'd rather just talk. I'm lonely. And at that point, the whole thing turned around for me, and it wasn't like cool or fun or fantasy anymore. It was like, I'm taking money from people that are just sad, and I was like, nah, I can't do this anymore.
And what age is that?
I was, it isn't like it is today. In 1970, if you were 16 or 17 years old, you were probably mentally 25, but I was 6'4", so they didn't card you at clubs. They didn't ask you for cards for cigarettes, so I must have been about 18, 19 years old, but I was 6'4", you know what I mean? I looked like I was 20-something, and nobody asked. Or they're like, I know you're not legally old enough, but if you don't tell anybody, I won't tell anybody. If they ask, just say you're 22. And nobody asked. You know what I mean? You're just this cute little dumb kid with a boner.
Did you want to be a producer or an artist? Do you consider yourself a vocal artist?
Originally, I went to High School Performing Arts Academy of Dramatic Arts. So the High School Performing Arts is where they did Fame, the movie.
Oh, okay, I love it.
I got thrown out the same day as Freddie Prinze. That's in my book, too. We both were called down to the office for being class clowns and disruptive. I was terrible in school. I had ADD, so I couldn't sit still, and I was cracking jokes and making fart sounds. And
you and me both.
Oh, yeah. Pulled my dick out once in front of somebody just to make some girls scream. I mean, I was out of control, so they threw me out.
We might be related.
Yeah, exactly. Back to the question. I wanted to be an actor, right? And music fell into my lap by smoking weed, because I was always into synthesizer music, but there wasn't enough of it out there then. There was some music concrete and obscure stuff like Tonto's Expanding Headband, which are they used to call it head music back then. Now it'd be sort of like ambient, And I thought, I can't smoke weed now. I get paranoid if I do. But back then, I want head music, trippy music to listen to. So sure. I bought a Radio Shack synthesizer kit, and I remember I had my blacklight posters, and that thing where it had a light bulb, and the light bulb would raise and it would turn, the projections on the wall. So I had that thing, you know what I mean, and burn some incense, smoke some weed, and I would with the synthesizer. So that's how I kind of got it into music. Now, I've worked with, I don't know, Boy George, Michael Jackson, Gloria Gaynor, Village People, Man to Man, Crystal Waters. I can go down lists and lists and lists of names. I can't read or write music. And if you told me to play something in the key of F, I would have to go. I wouldn't even know what's sharp and flat in that key. But I have a great ear for hearing things. It's bizarre. So I can hear things and figure out a way to reproduce it. I took a class at Berkeley for film scoring because I wanted to do film scoring. I had to get a special exception from my friend who works with George Lucas and with Hans Zimmer, explaining to the teacher that, this is man Parrish and he does really good music. Let him into the class even though he can't read orchestral charts because he'll do good. And I learned how to. I could score for a 200-piece orchestra and choir now, but I can't read the music. So if it wasn't for sequencers and computer assistants helping me get what's in my mind down on, we don't use tape anymore, but down on tape, so to speak, I wouldn't be able to do what I do because I could never be in a band. I can't say, hey, you got to play that B flat is a little sharp. I mean, I don't know. I have a friend of mine who went to Berkeley or Oberlin, which is like a real serious music school. And he's like, dude, I wish I could be like you. And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, you're not restrained by music theory and schooling. You want to make a thing go from C to A sharp. I couldn't do that, but you just take the chance and you do it, and you have a freedom that I don't have. So it's a blessing and a curse.
But at this point, the recording process takes a certain amount of knowing about music, and you're telling me that the computers have helped you over the years to understand it more, or do you still not understand it at all?
Well, I started doing, I called them soundscapes in those days because there was no such thing as ambient music. So I experimented with sound, and I learned about waveforms. I learned about frequencies, what's a sine wave and a square wave and a sawtooth wave. And then before going into music, I learned what is sound? It's air pressure, and things like is a garbage truck musical. I mean, that was the artistic stuff. Is that hum coming from that machine? That air conditioner? Is that music? Are there patterns in there? So I became hyper aware of sounds. And then when I went back to music, it was like not literally seeing in color, but I didn't see it like I'm hallucinating, but I saw sound instead of hearing sound, and that's how I use it to do what I do now.
And so how do you find yourself to the danceteria?
Oh, danceteria. I was a New York freak. I got a great story. I lived in a loft on 38th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. And if you know the artist Keith Haring, who used to graffiti and all that kind of stuff, these people were nobody back then. We all would hang out. They were local people. My friend Cherry Vanilla used to get Crazy Color, the hair color from London in the late 70s, early 80s, and nobody had it. So I dyed my hair purple and pink and green. And I was a couple blocks south of 42nd Street back in those days. It was like a blaxploitation movie, pimps walking down the street with the fur hats and stuff like that, Cadillacs blasting out music. And Danceteria was on 36th Street. Or 37th. I was on 38th, but one or two avenues over in Manhattan. So I used to go out. I'd have purple hair. I'd put on a new wave white shirt with a little tie, and then I'd put on a skirt with yellow leotards and blue, like ballet shoes.
You're blinding me with the color.
Oh yeah, that was total 80s, craziness. So I remember I walked from 5th Avenue to 6th Avenue, turned the corner, and I went up 37th Street to go over to 36th. And turning the corner on 8th Avenue are these hardcore dudes from Harlem uptown, and they're like kicking in the, they're knocking over garbage cans, just looking for trouble. And I thought, I'm 6'4", I'm a big dude, but I thought, holy shit, I'm going to get my ass kicked. Well, they froze, they looked at me, I looked at them, and they crossed the street because they couldn't deal with what they were looking at. So when I used to go to these clubs, I was the freak. They would let me in, So I went to Danceteria and to Area Club, and I've been in every club. I could do a whole book just on clubs of New York City. But I would get in all the time because I was part of the freak show, and They give you free drinks and, and come hang out in the VIP area. You know what I mean? And that was before I was just starting to do music. I had a couple of art rock, not art rock. I mean, it was, I guess, more new wave back then. And since I didn't play live, we had a band that had a cassette tape. And I would put a cassette in of the music, and the guys would sing, and the girls would do costume changes into weird, crazy outfits. So I also got into the clubs that way. Met Brian Eno. I used to go to Max's Kansas City. I saw Aerosmith when they were nobody. They would drive in their van down from, I think it's Boston, play a show, and then go lean on the van afterwards trying to get pussy after a show. I saw Bruce Springsteen do an acoustic set in the same rock and roll club and get booed off the stage. I saw Devo when they first started. Debbie Harry was the bartender, would go up on stage and sing for Blondie and then finish the set and go back and 10 bar. Talking Heads, Ramones, all that kind of 70s rock and roll stuff, I got to see it. And what's different is I lived in New York. So today we have social media. We can text and be part of all this stuff digitally.
Everything's close now, and it wasn't back then.
Well, back then, if it was a rotary dial phone. If you wanted to hang out with one friend, you would call them up and talk for a half hour. Right. Or everybody would get together on the weekends and go out to a club, and the cool clubs were either Max's Rock and Roll Club or Danceteria New Wave Club. And, discos weren't that big yet. They were starting to come in, but we hung out at clubs. So if there were beginning rock and roll bands like Aerosmith and, and Devo and Talking Heads, I mean, they played these clubs because they were local bands, so to speak. So, it wasn't a big world back then. It was, 500 people that went out to this club on the weekend, and that was,
an entire movement here 40 years later. Right.
I mean, the movement wasn't big because it was it was a bubble just starting to happen,
Your most profitable single to date, I think you said was most profitable, it's Heat Stroke.
No. Actually, Hip Hop Be Bop obviously is the most profitable.
Oh.
We talk about profit, but I don't make any money off of that album. And it's a long story that I'll talk about in the book. But basically what happened is I got one of those shitty record deal one-page things. And, the guy wound up buying an airplane off of my royalties, a Porsche with a hand-carved dashboard. He bought a house out in the country. And I literally got nothing. I went up crying one day, a couple months later. I can't pay my rent. He goes, here's $200. My rent was, I think, $900 for a giant loft back in those days. And he goes, here's $200. Don't ever ask for money again. I said, well, when do I get paid? He goes, well, it could take a year or two because we have to collect the royalties from somebody who collects the royalties from somebody who collects the royalties. And then we got to figure out returns. And, I got this whole laundry list of bullshit. And then he said, and then after that, we have 90 days to pay you. And I was a 22-year-old kid. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I got smart enough and I realized, so all that stuff was signed away. And then when I left the record label, it was done. Long story short, the record label, after the owner who ran it died, 2 cokeheads ran the label and started selling off masters for $1,000 for coke, and they sold my stuff up to a company in Canada called Unidisc and forged my signature on it. So it went into a lawsuit and all this other kind of stuff, which didn't work out. So for Hip Hop, Be Bop, Boogie Down Bronx, Heat Stroke, Man Made, the whole album there, I get 0 for it, and it hurts really, 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 really bad. In fact, when I played Studio 54, and then when I went back home, my father, had a small job, barely could support himself. I lived in the house. I was on welfare, and I had food stamps while I would stand out, sit on my front steps smoking a cigarette, and cars would come down the block with Hip Hop Be Bop, busting out on the huge KTU radio station there in New York. And here I am standing in the corner of a club. Nobody knew me, but out, they're playing Hip Hop, Be Bop, Boogie Down Bronx, and I did Two Sisters.
Take it from a man who has the perfect beat, the G-L-O-B-E. I'm speaking on behalf of my other people brothers. The beat not go like jelly and peanut butter. Being that I am a so full alibi. When your beat goes rock, so much stock. It takes sugar and spice, what to made up. But yo, these are the land too. My man who says no, but let's
did High Noon. I did a lot of things under other names, and here are these records. I'd go to a club and hear 4 or 5 of my songs, but I barely had enough money to go home. In fact, sometimes I would ride my bike to the club and tie it up to the, to the lamppost, and then go into the club with just barely enough money to pay for admission. So I don't make many money off of that.
About the Boogie Down Bronx, it's a one of a kind. It's the place to be, it's a state of mind. About the guys out here, they really are cooking. They snatch gold chains when the cops ain't looking. But Brooklyn, I say, is the place to be. It's where I stay in reality. So listen close, and you all will hear about the devastating body rocker of the year.
Is that why you've made some money off the porno, and then the other stuff you didn't?
The porno stuff happened before hip hop, Be Bop, and then when I walked away from that record deal, because why am I giving somebody tracks that are not paying me? At a certain point, I'm the idiot. At a certain point, you wake up and you go, I think they're taking advantage of you here. I walked. I was on welfare, food stamps. I didn't have any income, and that was late 80s, early 90s, when the internet was picking up and web pages were starting to happen. Dude, I used to dial AOL, with my 14K modem with that disc that they mailed everybody in the mail. And I was on. Yep. In fact, I remember the internet before that, when you would dial up to a BBS, a bulletin board system, in somebody's house. They had a little Commodore 64 computer with a modem, and they had a couple of pages that were text, and when you clicked on an inverted text, that was all the web was. That it would say, this is a picture of an inverted dog, and when you clicked on dog, it would take you to another page that maybe had a picture, but it was a whole explanation of a dog, and you're going, wow, look at this, is cool. On a 14K dial-up modem.
DOS is where the party is.
Yeah. Well, there were also dirty sites where you can get laid, and
the BBS is where the party is.
Yeah, exactly. You could buy drugs and get laid on a BBS.
All that.
But later on, the porn sites started happening, and I thought, well, I did porn movies, and I'm a fucking freak. Yeah, and I like sex, so why don't I try doing this myself? So I shot some porn. I had a couple of websites, but quickly, a lot of people did too, and people with money. So after, a couple of months, a year, I couldn't. It was barely sustaining it. You know what I mean? So, I gave it up. But it sure is fun putting, a camera in people's balls and getting teabagged while you're taking pictures.
I've never been there. I don't know.
I can put that on my resume. Can you?
That one doesn't appear on mine, brother.
There you go.
Let me ask you this. So is this Mike Wilkinson we talk about?
Yeah, he passed away. He was gay. He was one of the first people that passed away of AIDS, and back then it wasn't AIDS. It was called GRID, gay-related immune deficiency, and they gave you penicillin for it because they didn't know what it was. And he got dementia.
There's one I've never heard of. I'm in high school in 82, so 82 to 86 is when I'm in high school.
I was in the mine shaft in 82.
I never heard of what you just said again. Say that again.
The very, very early, we had friends in New York that were getting sick. One of the guys I worked with was Klaus Nomi, also Mike Wilkinson. And they were getting flu-like symptoms and losing weight, and nobody knew what it was. And then they would develop these sores on their body because there was no test for an antibody because they didn't know what it was.
Right.
If you got the sores, you went into the hospital, and if we went to visit them, you had to put on like a gown, because they didn't know if you touched it or if you breathed it. They didn't know how it was transmitted, but all I knew, there was a couple of, there's a floor of 20 beds with guys and a couple of girls that were getting sick off of this. But since it was mostly guys, they knew their immune system was compromised. They call it gay-related immune deficiency, or GRID.
Gotcha.
And they gave you penicillin. And back then, the virus was so strong, it killed you like in 6 months. Now you can get it and live 10, 12 years without even it. People that don't get tested can live 10, 12 years without symptoms, because a virus that strong will eventually wipe itself out by wiping everybody else out, so it mutates and it becomes coexistent with its host over many generations of reproducing itself. So back then, it was a really strong virus and killed you really quickly. Mike Wilkinson, the owner of the record company, was one of the first people to get that. He became demented, escaped from the hospital, got on a plane in his hospital gown. I don't know how they checked him in. Went down to Texas and was taking $1,000 a day out from his on his American Express card and giving $100 bills out to everybody in the street. And the record company who screwed me, the girl calls me up from the office and goes, "Old Michael does is talk about you. You're the only person who can go down there and get him and bring him back." And I thought, this guy fucked me really bad. Why do I want to go down there and save this guy? You know what I mean? Go get a butterfly net, put him in a straitjacket, stick him on a plane and send him back. But I'm a human being, you know what I mean? And here's somebody who's suffering, doesn't know what they're doing, and I agreed to doing it. And that was the last I dealt with Import 12 and that record label.
This man ripped you off.
Yeah, but there's a difference between financial money, but when it comes to human people suffering, animal suffering, I'm not a tree hugger, and I'm not eating my granola and praying to the moon.
Okay.
But, at a certain point, it's not fair in my life anymore. And it's like, yeah, you did something fucked up, but you're so fucked up. Somebody's got to help you. Nobody's doing it. So
You're a sympathetic man is what you are.
Yeah, a little too much sometimes.
That sounds like what you're talking about right now. But,
yeah.
And so he was ripping you off 3 ways. There were 3 hits, 3 clubs, 3 types. How was that? He had...
And 3 types of business. He took my artist royalties. He took my... what they call mechanicals. Every time, it's an old phrase from back in the old days, when they mechanically make a record and then sell it, you get a royalty for that, and publishing.
I got out of rhythm in '94 when Dre hit the radio back here. I was offered a job at a country radio station. I did that for 20 some odd years, but I've only heard the licensing game from a few people. So at the end of the podcast, I want to talk to you specifically about that and maybe have that just a podcast based on new artists. So that might even be a second podcast of its own.
I have 107 tracks out on iTunes, and I own all of it, right? So it's not hard to do today. I just want to let people know that if they don't listen to that podcast real quick, you can do all of it yourself. And the music business is a business, so you need to learn the business. So a day or 2 on YouTube and doing some Google searches, you can learn about all this stuff, and you won't get ripped off like me and other people did.
When do you get to Vanguard Studio and start hanging around?
Vanguard Studios was, hip-hop, Be Bop, and all that kind of stuff. Africa Bambaataa, Freeze Force, Shannon, Arthur Baker. Arthur Baker, was Planet Rock. He was Planet Patrol. All that, sure. They basically took the same track and they made copies of it, erased. They left a doom, 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 doom. But Arthur Baker was using the same literal copies of the same thing, and then put new overdubs on top of it with John Roby, and they built multiple tracks. That was like the Motown of that style of music. And I want to talk about that style of music because a lot of kids don't know hip-hop and rap were 2 different things. And I explained this before on other interviews.
Hip-hop is a dance format first.
Yeah, hip-hop is a jazz term, which means your hips are hopping. It's dancing. And it was music like My Stuff, Planet Rock, all that kind of New York urban electronic dance music, which came out of Kraftwerk, was hip-hop. Then there was rap, which is Rapper's Delight and Curtis Blow. Yeah, all these kind of things like that. But that kind of melded hip hop and rapper somewhat. They're not dance music anymore. It's based off.
It mumbles now. It's mumbling music now. But...
it's rhyme and stuff like that. And there's a lot of good stuff, and there's a lot of fucking shit. Well, in anything, there's good dance music, there's bad dance music, there's good country and bad country. You know what I mean? So,
what's the worst song you ever made?
Brown Sugar, the Rolling Stones remake.
Gold Coast slave ship out for cotton fields, sold in a market down in New Orleans. That scarred old slaver knows he's doing all right. Should hear him whip the women just around midnight.
Because I did all the voices on it, and there's like brown sugar.
What year?
I was on Fred Mineo's Select Records with UTFO, Roxanne, and all those people. I was on that label, and I brought it to Fred Mineo, and thank God he has a sense of humor. He's like, this is so fucked up. It's like a weird Yal Yankovic, kind of thing. He said, I'll put it out. I was on Select Records for 5 minutes, but and people love it. They go, oh wow, it's so creative and weird and twisted. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, and it was. I got a weird sense of humor. Like I got jokes. You know what I mean? But it's not something I'm proud of. But now that I listen to it, it's so fucked up. I love it.
Mike Wilkinson was taking you 3 different ways, and I don't mean that in any kind of.
Listen, at least if I got laid, I would have had some pleasure out of it. You know what I mean? I got fucked without Vaseline, hardcore.
He had you produce 3 hits, different hits.
He didn't have me produce it. That stuff was done already. The Heatstroke porn soundtrack. And I made a whole $1,000. Some DJ played it in a club. It's in my book in detail that I'm doing. Basically, he had DiscoNet, and that was one of the first DJ services they would take a Donna Summer record, because that's what was coming out then, or Planet Rock, and they would physically edit tape. Him and Raul Rodriguez, just 2 of them, would physically edit tape and do extended dance remixes before anybody else was doing it. In fact, Atlantic Records and all these things, all those 12-inch records were mostly Mike Wilkinson and Raul Rodriguez. They would get a lead in where they were putting this out on DiscoNet as a DJ subscription service, and then the record label would put it out as a 12-inch remix a couple of months later. I did Heatstroke. They wanted to extend that. They put it out. A lot of people liked it, and he said, "What else do you have?" And I already had Hip Hop Bebop was an experimental piece of music that we then put dog barking and the lyrics on. But Man-Made, Boogie Down Bronx came almost a year later. But he didn't have me do anything. I produced my own stuff, and he put it out.
Sorry about that.
No.
But he was ripping you off 3 ways, 3 hits, 3 clubs.
No, more than
times.
3. There's what, 10 songs on my album, and
son of a bitch.
yeah, and then there's Boogie Down Bronx, and
Cosmo got ripped off the same way by a broom closet lawyer. The same thing. He told me the same fucking story.
There was a lot of money. In fact, when my album came out, it did so well that. Like some Jamaican dudes were bootlegging it, right. And the FBI and the RIAA came in, and we were in Manhattan, in Fulton Street in Brooklyn. They busted a shop, and they uncovered, I think, 450,000 albums that they had printed up. So I sold 5 million records, but they never told me that. And then I'm in Grand Theft Auto 1 and 3, which sold 80 million. So, I'm up there with Michael Jackson. I sold 85 million people have my music, which is pretty fucking cool, but not everybody knows my name. But that's all right. I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it now. I'm older, and it's more about my legacy than it is. I'm never going to get on stage again and shake my fat stomach around. You know what I mean? I'm going to produce records that I want to produce, because you don't make money on that shit anymore. Maybe do a tour here or there, and like I mentioned to you before we did this, I'm now going to be at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which we could talk about separately, but I'm starting to get these bigger career things that people are going, oh, yeah, you're that guy. You started this electronic dance music. And to be asked by MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, to do stuff is a big deal. So, that's where my head's
New York's a big city, so yes.
Yeah. Well, it was a small city when I was there. Because we went out and there was either people that went home at 9 o'clock at night that worked in this thing, and then there was the club freaks that came out when the sun came down. That was a small town.
Hey, growing up in the disco era, where you were, what were the favorite songs that you enjoyed at the club before you started doing your own music?
Oh, shit. First of all, Giorgio Moroder, I Feel Love. I mean, anything synthesizer, my fucking titties lit up like a fucking headlight, sparklers, you know what I mean? I was into synthesizer stuff. I listened to rock and roll that I couldn't stand, like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, just for that synthesizer solo. There was no synthesizer back then. And then when Kraftwerk came out, I remember I was living on Central Park West, 71st Street in a brownstone, and I remember how old I was. I was 16, 17 years old. I took a cab home, and Autobahn from Kraftwerk was played on the rock and roll station because there were no dance stations. You were either rock and roll, classical, or jazz, right? And it wasn't even called alternative. It was just, Oh, yeah, MOR. Well, that was a little later. They just played this, it's this group, Kraftwerk and Autobahn. And I remember sitting in the back of the cab. There weren't dividers back in those days because they weren't blowing people's heads off with guns. And I remember staring at the radio, and the guy pulled up. I paid him, and we just sat there with the engine idling. After I paid him, I was supposed to get out, and we're listening to Autobahn, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Yo, and I was like, I have a synthesizer upstairs. I don't have to have a band anymore. I could figure out a way to do this myself because 4 guys did this. I used a tape recorder with a technology called Sound on Sound, and you can go Google it because it'll be a whole 10 minutes of explaining. But you could build up layers and layers of music on tracks, and suddenly I can have a band. I bought a drum machine, and I started experimenting. So,
4-track or 8-track first?
No, 4-track. At 4-track. 2-track Sound on Sound to 4-track to 8-track. And then I had a 24-track machine, which is nothing but a hole that I threw money into because it always broke down. And then computers started getting stronger, and everything was virtual MIDI down to digital audio tape, DAT tape, and now... And
the Macintosh.
I do, yeah. I have the Mac Tower. I've got 4 monitors, and I probably do... 48, 60, 100 tracks, depending on what the project is and stuff like that. But the great thing about having an 8-track tape recorder and why that music is so simple and childish and good is I couldn't do 25 or 30 or 50 tracks. I had to carefully think. I had 1 track for vocals, 1 track for drums, mono, all the drums, drum machine on 1 track.
You were using economy of tracks early on,
well,
so you didn't need all that overkill.
So
right.
We couldn't have 30 tracks of background vocals and 45 overdubs. You had 1 track, and you better put something on there that's interesting. Otherwise, that's it. So, in a way, it was a great way to learn how to put music together because you couldn't overproduce and you couldn't throw shit on there. And it either worked.
And time is money.
Well, not when you're doing your own studio. I would start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd look up, and it'd be 9 o'clock the next morning. It's like, wow, I think I should go to sleep. I drank enough soda and smoked 3 packs of Newport cigarettes back then. You know what I mean? And I'm nauseous from the nicotine. Time to go to to bed, you know.
You dropped from Studio 54, the roof of Studio 54.
Twice.
Madonna was your opening act.
And Henry Kissinger danced with Brooke Shields. On the side couch was Andy Warhol, David Bowie, Liza Minnelli, Mick Jagger, Bianca Jagger, Truman Capote. Michael Jackson was in the audience for that.
Let's dance, let's shout, shake your body down to the ground. Let's dance, let's shout, shake your body down to the ground. Let's dance, let's shout, shake your body down.
And I met him that day, and I wound up doing a remix on Speed Demon.
Our local boy done good is there that night.
Yeah, hell, fuck yeah.
George Lucas.
Yeah, well, that was a second party. I played the Return of the Jedi premiere opening party, and they asked would I come down from the ceiling. I had this cape and this hood with dry ice coming out of it, so I guess I looked like Darth Vader, and I used to joke and I'd say it's more like Dorothy Vader than Darth Vader, right? But I would stand there and all the smoke would come out from under my cape, so of course it was perfect for Star Wars because it wasn't intended to be, you know, Darth Vader, but it was Darth Vader, so they asked me. But I came down from the ceiling, and this unknown girl named Madonna was my opening act. And then afterwards, I'm in the dressing room, and these two giant, refrigerator dudes come up, and they go, "Mr. Jackson wants to talk to you." And I'm like, "Mr. Jack? I don't know any Mr. Jackson. Just come with me. Come with me." Go. I thought, who the fuck is Mr. Jackson? Somebody serving me papers. You know, did I do something? Did I fuck somebody's girlfriend? I mean, what's going on here? And yeah, Michael Jackson. Yeah, I heard of him. Yeah. "Hi, pleased to meet you, and I really like your show." And I said, "Thank you, Mr. Jackson." No. You call me Michael. You call me Michael. I said, "Well, thank you, Michael, and I really love what you do," which I did. He goes, "Would you be interested in doing a mix on my new album, Speed Demon?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, okay, somebody will be in touch with you. Thank you. And then the guys were like, you know, "Time to leave." And I was like, "What just happened?" and about 2 weeks later, we got a call from Quincy Jones from Q West, his production company, and they sent over the tape of him, you know, doing Speed Demon. And I was listening to the vocal solo because you EQ it and you compress it and you get it to sound good. And I kept hearing this boom, boom, and I said, "What the hell is going on in the background?" He was in the vocal booth, and he stamps on the ground. You know what I mean? Okay. So he had a hard time isolating his vocal from his foot stomping because he used to stomp so hard. You know what I mean? But
wow, that's a good one right there.
In those days, to do digital, there weren't DAT tapes, there weren't CD players, there weren't digital recorders. There was something, you would put it through this conversion box, and it would store the data on a Betamax tape. And somewhere I have a Betamax tape with Michael Jackson's, him sing. It'd be great to sample that, right? Or "Hey, buddy, what are you doing, buddy?" My dog's biting my shoes. "Come on up here. Here.
What kind of dog?
Yeah, I just threw him a bone. He's got fucking sissy dogs. I've got a Min Pin Chihuahua, and I got a Jack Russell Chihuahua.
I got 3 Jack Russells. I got a Doberman, 2 Dobermans, and we rescued a pit bull German Shepherd Chow mix. I live out on a farm.
They're all rescues, you know. So,
in order, where do you rank yourself in all of those songs?
A lucky motherfucking white dude that was doing black urban music who stepped in shit and slid all the way to not riches, but being known. You know, I was an Italian dude from Brooklyn. I started rock and roll, got into new wave disco, hung out with Andy Warhol, Keith Haring, and all these people, you know, with an art crowd that did a porn soundtrack and wound up in the dance hip-hop world. But I'm doing something for the Museum of Modern Art. I have this artistic side. I do a lot of ambient music, and I do a lot of classical music. It's on my SoundCloud page, SoundCloud it's Man Parrish -1. But that's stuff people don't know about me. But I'm consider myself extremely lucky. I didn't grow up with a spoon in my mouth. My parents weren't rich. They were just normal, middle-class, normal people. But here I am doing stuff that's played in the South Bronx at the Fever and at the Fun House, with Jelly Bean Bonitas and people barking at my records. And then we were barking back at them with hip-hop bebop, So people say I coined the phrase Boogie Down Bronx. We were the first people to use it. Did I? I don't know. They also say that I coined the phrase hip-hop. But I didn't.
You were the first to use hip-hop in a title, right?
I also had a track called Techno Tracks, and people say, it depends what group you're in. If you talk to kids in England, I was the first person to do techno because I did a track called Techno Tracks, But look, I can get a real ego about this, and I created hip-hop, and I created techno, and, let a historian figure that out.
Before you in hip-hop, what was the hit right before yours?
I don't know.
Where are you from Planet Rock? Planet Rock after you?
Pretty like within months.
Who's first? Who's first?
I think they were.
Okay.
And that's it. There was nothing before that.
You and Arthur Baker are the only guys touching an 808 at that time.
Yeah, because the 808 had just come out. Right. And it wasn't Arthur. It was probably John Roby that did the 808.
John Roby, okay, sure.
And if anybody knows, he's the guy who played. Arthur Baker doesn't play keyboards. John does. Arthur was the producer, which means he paid for the studio time and said, "No, do it this way, do it that way." And John was the slave that did what the producer says. I'm sure Arthur didn't get paid that much, and I know John Roby didn't, because he wound up not being in favor with Arthur anymore. And in fact, Mike Wilkinson had money from my record but refused to pay anybody to go in the studio. So without me knowing, he paid John Roby a third of Hip Hop Bebop's rights and publishing, and Raul, who was basically his secretary, gave him a third and me a third. So on the writing credits, it says Man, Parrish, Raul Rodriguez, and John Roby. John Roby came in and did, and I don't hate him for it because I would have taken the same deal, but he came in for maybe 2 hours or 3 hours on that record. We didn't sit down and, that record was weeks of work, and, he came in for 2 hours, and I thought the record company's paying him, but when he walked out, he says, "I can't pay you, but I'll give you a third of the record." And he's like, "Sure, I'll take that." You know what I mean? So I got screwed on a lot of different...
A bunch. Yeah. It's a bunch. It's like you're the born loser, that old cartoon that's not in a... And I don't mean that as a loser. I mean, you're very successful, but it seems like you...
It fucked my head up so bad. I remember going to Tower Records, and I had no money, and I was on welfare, and I used to jump the subway to get into Manhattan from my father's house in Brooklyn, just to go to a club. And I'd walk around, and I'd go to Tower Records, and I'd dig through some of the compilation bins, and here's Hip Hop Bebop, and here's Boogie Down Bronx, and, I would do Two Sisters, High Noon, there's that. There's a COD in the bottle, which we did. IRT, watch your closing.
Hip hop boy, DIRT, at to get South Ferry. I'm conducting your man in blue, and I'll take care of you. Hold on to your hats and your pocketbooks. You with the legs, watch out for your looks. Hold on for your life like never before, and watch the closing doors. I said watch the closing doors. The lights are out in car number 3, starting early, smoking the weed. It's a beautiful day. If you're getting off, give a lady a seat. Watch the closing doors. I said watch the closing doors. Car 3 is flying. Car number 7 smells like somebody's got in this fancy the pimp in his usual spot. I put out of the pot. Watch the closing
these things, and hip hop bebop's getting licensed and licensed and licensed and licensed, and I'm not getting a penny off of it.
Yeah, I don't understand.
And I got to the point. I remember I had a hoodie on, and I remember I'm looking down, and I just started crying. I'm holding the thing in my hand, and I just felt really broken and really bad. And this girl comes up to me, and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I'm just having a bad day." I didn't want to say, "Yeah, you see that name? That's me." You know what I mean? And I'm not getting paid. And I thought, wow, this is bad. So I shut down, and I refused to do music for 10 years, right on the spot there in Tower Records, holding these. And I'd seen a whole bunch of compilations. 10 years later, I go to work at a club. A guy comes in and says, "Hey, man, congratulations on Grand Theft Auto." And I went, What are you talking about? He goes,
I know. I don't get it, man. I thought they had to clear this shit. This is illegal, isn't it?
My record deal was for records. It wasn't for movies. I'm in Shaun of the Dead. They hold up my record, and I'm in Grand Theft Auto 1 and 3. You know, in fact, the 808 movie that just came out, They put out a soundtrack. I can't get a penny off of that. You know what I mean? So I said, "What do you mean Grand Theft Auto? What are you talking about? You play the video game, you get in the car, you turn on the radio, hip hop bebop's there." What? And then in Grand Theft Auto 3, Boogie Down, what? I had to borrow money to buy a Sony PlayStation and a couple extra bucks more to put the disc in to play the game to the part where you get on the car and you turn on the radio and there's my music. And at that point, I was able to. A friend helped me. He said, "Go talk to my lawyer. I'll pay for it." You know, the lawyer actually did it for free, and he said, "This is too big for me," and got me hooked up with an artist. They're called Artist Rights. It's an artist rights company. They go after you people that screw over artists for free.
And did it work?
No, there was a technicality.
My goodness.
Here's the power of
6 years.
You have 6 years. So
I'll
explain it real fast to people that are listening. You put out a record today, and you don't get paid. You have 6 years from the moment it's called discovery, that you discover you're being robbed, right? Like, oh, he's not paying me. You have 6 years from that time to find out. Now, I had stopped doing music with Import 12 in 86, 96, or something like that, or 2000, the Grand Theft Auto came out. I'm in 2005 or 6 trying to do a lawsuit. Now, that's when I discovered it. But in 1988, I was sitting in a lawyer's office with a friend, and my friend said, "Why don't you ask this lawyer about your hip-hop bebop stuff?" And I said, "You know what? I don't have the money to hire anybody right now. Thank you for the offer, but I don't want to, it's not going to go anywhere. I can't give you the $10,000 deposit, whatever you're going to need." That's all that I said. Their lawyers found out that I spoke to a lawyer, and they said, "Well, if you spoke to him, you must have realized that you were being ripped off, and if that's the case, your discovery is 1986, not 2006, so you're 20 years too late." And on that technicality, I was not allowed to go to court, because if I went to court and I said, "I never got a penny, I was on welfare, this guy bought a house, a car, blah, blah," there would have been millions and millions of dollars that they owed me. If I sold 5 million records at $1, people don't realize that artists only make $1 on that $10 album that's sold, right? Because the record companies keep 90%. It's the worst thing in the world, but that's the way it is. Book publishing the same way. I'm writing a book. They give you 7 cents on $1. They keep the rest. They just fucking keep it. That's it. So at 5 million records, $1 each, I'd have $5 million in my pocket, and it's, it hurts. It fucking hurts,
You live in a home you don't have to pay for. Is it paid off?
But only because I took 20 years of my life and I took care of my father, who was old, and spoon-fed him, and finally till I couldn't put him in a nursing home. And then when he passed, I inherited the house that I lived in, and I was able to sell it and then buy my own house. You know what I mean?
Oh,
and that's
okay.
I still have to pay taxes. I bought two condos on the beach, and I Airbnb them, and that feeds me. You know what I mean? But I've been lucky, even with the stuff on iTunes. This is why streaming is really bad, because when you sold records, you'd make you make your $1 a record when you sold a record for $10. Then when your stuff was on the radio, you made 3 or 4 cents every time they played it on the radio, and you maybe get $1,000 every couple of months from all around the country and around the world of all those 4 cents. You get a couple of grand, whatever. Now it's streaming. They pay you 0.00025 cents every time it's streamed through, Spotify or Pandora or one of those sort of things. So you could have hundreds of thousands of plays and get a check for $20.
It just doesn't.
And people, because everybody, when the record companies crashed, they went over to streaming, and there was no laws for streaming and no precedents. Right. So
the Wild West.
Yeah, so they basically said, we're going to make up our own regulations, and we're going to pay people 0.025 cents. That's why a lot of artists back years ago were protesting, I don't want my stuff on Pandora because you're not making anything. But the bad thing about it is nobody buys records anymore. Everybody streams. You pay $10 a month. You have Spotify. You pay $10 a month. You have Apple, whatever it is. And royalties, but when I looked at my streams, there was something like 650,000 streams, and I think I got a check for like $60. So why is there not good music? Because the good musicians have to wait tables or get real jobs when they used to be music, unless you could tour. And people like me, I'm a studio producer. You can't tour. I can't take my studio in a box and put it on a stage. I mean, I could, but I'd be crazy. I'm not a disco or dance or rock or pop or rapper. So, taking my act on the road is a lot more difficult than a band or a singer. So my ways of making music are a lot less. I don't make music for money anymore. I make music because I'm happy, and I just want to do what I want to do. I could give a fuck if it's sold, but people are interested in it because I have a history, so it's kind of cool. Listen to my stuff. One time you're going to hear dance music, and the next time you're going to hear some ambient shit. And I did a remix of a rock and roll track and put 808 on it, and it's kind of just different. So, to me, music isn't one style or another. I'm not dance or rock or country. I just like shit that sounds good. I don't care if it's Romanian polka music. If it sounds cool, I'd probably be into it. When I went to Metropolitan Museum of Art, I went to the High School of Performing Arts. I was working at the Metropolitan Opera House as an extra on stage. I used to get paid $10 to stand there and hold a spear during Aida, and we were dropping acid on stage while they're singing opera. So I've been exposed to a lot of different kind of music, crazy environments, but a lot of different kind of music. So it opened up my head to not just dance music or not just rap or rock or jazz, just good sounds. And stuff sounds good. I don't care what category. It's funny. A lot of kids are into retro analog gear. And they're like, oh, dude, you're so lucky. I'm like, what are you talking about? I turn on a synthesizer, get a sound, and there was no programming. So when you shut it off, that sound was gone. You couldn't recreate it later. Or if the synthesizer warmed up, it would go maybe a half step out of tune to all the other synthesizers. And you spent hours tuning synthesizers. And as it got warmer in the room or colder in the room, stuff would shift. It was a nightmare. You couldn't synchronize a drum machine, a bass drum, and a keyboard together back in those days. I did music, hip-hop, Be Bop, Boogie Down Bronx, all those digital Kraftwerky kind of things. That was done before computers, before musical instrument, digital interface, MIDI, and before any kind of synchronization technology. That was done by hand. That's a whole other podcast.
let's talk about your songs real quick. Let's talk about Man-Made, and I want to know if you still have that same original vocoder.
I have the vocoder. It's probably, if I open it up, it's probably dust. That vocoder I bought. Well, first of all, everybody wanted to be Kraftwerk at one point, after Numbers came out. And Man-Made was my attempt at being Kraftwerk, right? And my recording studio was Man-Made Studios. I thought, Man-Made, perfect syllables, perfect, thing. That vocoder was an EMS 2000 vocoder. Now, it may sound like whatever to somebody. There was a group called Electric Light Orchestra, and they did a song called Mr. Blue Sky. They had that vocoder in there. They bought it and they recorded it in a studio like on 49th Street in Manhattan. And afterwards, they just took it around the corner and said, just here, go sell it. We don't want it anymore. We're not going to put it on our tour bus. We don't want it. They put it in a case at Sam Ash Music or Manny's Music. I think I bought it at Sam Ash. And I walked in and I knew the guys because I was a gear junkie. I was buying drum machines and stuff. I said, what's that? I knew what it was. I said, what's that? He goes, it's a blow voter or something like that. I said, a recorder. So, I don't know. We don't know what it is. And I said, really? I said, well, how much is it? He goes, I don't know. Give me $20 for it. I mean, it was like $5,000. And I was like, can you make it 15? I'll take it. He said, sure. Just get it out of here. And I walked home with a world-class vocoder. I used to do... If anybody's listening from New York City and old school, there was a radio station called KTU. And I used to do all the station IDs with the vocoder. I was the first person to do that. It was a form of payola. I used to do 92 KTU on the vocoder and all kinds of custom drops for them.
And they'd play your stuff.
And they would play my stuff. So no matter what I gave them, as long as it didn't have dirty lyrics on it, they would put it into heavy rotation, and I would give them more station IDs.
I'm not so sure that that's payola.
It's a form of payola. You're not using so check this out.
I'm very familiar with the payola. Let me tell you what.
Listen, Mike Wilkinson, he was very smart. When he was promoting my album, he used to put little bags of Coke and MDA in the cover. I remember him sitting there with bags of Coke on his desk, and I said, what are you doing? He goes, Manny, I'm going to make your record, like the biggest thing on earth. I said, well, what the fuck? He goes, are you kidding me? All these crazy DJs are all drug addicts. I'm giving them a free hit so they can listen to your record, and that way they're forced to report it on the Billboard, charts because they owe me one. And you know what? He was right.
He was right.
So, we payola people, radio stations, DJs, Billboard reporters. Well, he did with drugs.
Man-Made had that vocoder sound. Is that a setting you use consistently throughout all of your vocoder stuff?
Pretty much. The thing with a vocoder is you have to know how to talk on a vocoder. If you hear somebody really working a vocoder, my vocoder, I pride it on being very clear. A lot of vocoders sound like this on a vocoder. At least you can understand the words on my vocoder. There are very few settings, and there are very few... You feed in a synthesizer frequency, you feed in your voice, and these filters produce the vocoder sound. If you put in a dull sound, it doesn't get the sibilant of your voice, and you can't hear all those crisp, sounds. So I used a certain kind of waveform and bright sound, and you would over-enunciate, which would open and close the filters a little harder, make it more understandable. So that Man-Made sound I used on Boogie Down Bronx and everything, anytime I did a vocoder, it was a sound that worked. I could have made other sounds, but they were less intelligible. So that was my sound.
Who's your vocoder hero?
Kraftwerk, because they not only did vocoder, they had speech synthesis, which drove me crazy, and it wasn't...
That was Sam. That was the early speech automated mouth.
Hello, everyone. It sure is nice to be here today. I am Sam.
A Radio Shack TRS-80 first home computer before Apple and before IBM. Yep. And it had a speech synthesizer on it. It had a cassette recorder that would load in less memory that's in your watch, like 10K of memory off of an audio cassette. It sounded like a static. And it would take 15 minutes to load, and you would program stuff in BASIC. Mm-hmm.
Same with graphics. It was all that, bitmaps, everything.
Yeah, same thing with my very first sequencer. I got Giorgio Moroder's sequencer that he used on I Feel Love. Before computers, I'd have to type in binary hexadecimal code, which that would put out as voltages to make musical notes. So, you want to geek out? Let's go.
I love it, man. Boogie Down Bronx.
That came a year later.
Nothing changed your life monetarily as it should have, but Boogie Down Bronx is a jump off.
I was doing other records, so while I was waiting to quote unquote get paid for my record label, I was doing other records. I was playing keyboards on people's records. I was doing Two Sisters. Me and Raul used to hang out. And somebody said, "Oh, you guys are like two sisters. You're always hanging out with each other."
B-Boys Beware is one of my favorites.
Yeah, B-Boys Beware, High Noon.
With a globe in it?
Yeah. We got Teresa, who worked at the office, a secretary, and her friend to pose on the cover. We hired studio singers to sing. But I wrote the music, and, Raul was, make it funkier. I'm like, come on, Raul. Come on, make it fun. All right, we'll make it funky. You know what I mean? That was my relationship with Raul.
Rest in peace to Raul.
Yeah, I think he drank himself to death, quite honestly.
A lot of people do.
He didn't get paid. He did all these records, didn't get paid.
You haven't went that route.
There's a physical reason. I have something called central apnea. It's different than sleep apnea. When I get drunk or I get high or I fall asleep too heavily, my brain doesn't tell my lungs to breathe, and you suffocate. I have a special machine that looks like a sleep apnea machine, but is not a sleep apnea machine. I've had it all my life. That helps me breathe because when I go to sleep at night, I go into so much of a K-hole, if you're doing ketamine. I kind of get so sleepy that I stop breathing, and this stops.
We are geeking out right now because I'm full obstructive.
It's the same type of machine. Your machine's is $400. My machine is $5,000. And my insurance doesn't cover it. I had to save up for a machine so I wouldn't die in my sleep, right?
How can they not cover it? Let's not get started on that. How do they not cover it? Apnea is apnea, isn't it?
It's something that they don't want to pay, so they say get an obstructive apnea machine. And I'm like, I had an obstructive apnea machine for 10 years, and I would wake up choking all the time and my heart pounding. Until this year, I finally got the doctor said, you don't have obstructive apnea. Look at this. You're off the charts with your central apnea. So if I can't do sedation, I can't do anesthesia without somebody breathing me on like a breathing machine. They have to watch me closely. Right. So I love getting high, but I can't do anything sedative because I fall asleep. One beer, I fall asleep. If I do weed, if I don't get paranoid, I fall asleep. But if I fall asleep, I better put my machine on. So, so I'd love to do it, but I've learned through, trial and error, I can't.
Parrish and cool Raul, cooler than the water in a swimming pool. I like the R to the A, the U, and the L, pushing more power than a Duracell. I'm like the M to the A, the N, and the Y, the hip hop master that you can't deny. So check out the beat and listen to the sound. And if you're from the Bronx, just boogie down.
Boogie Down Bronx's seminal track, right there with Planet Rock.
Thanks.
What's your theme song when you're walking down the street? I asked Egyptian Lover what his theme song, and he said Egypt, Egypt. When he's walking down the street, he hears Egypt, Egypt in his head. What's your theme song when you're walking down the street?
Of my music or anybody's music?
Decipher it however you'd like.
I'm a Kraftwerk junkie because I like digital sequenced music, right? So I love the precision, the German precision and all that kind of stuff. So
a Kraftwerk song?
Numbers was really, really cool, but it was kind of like a fluffy track. I mean, I love Giorgio Moroder's album Equal MC Square. I put the grooves off of that record because it was...
That's Cosmo D's favorite album, too.
Yeah, because it was the first... He took something called an MC8 microcomposer and programmed this digital stuff in for an hour. That whole album was recorded live, right? Because you couldn't... there was no... It's one continuous recording of multiple songs, and they went back and put vocals,
Interesting.
Yeah. And it was recorded on an MC8 microcomposer. I'm not a microcomposer, the MC8 big composer in hexadecimal. And then they had 8 of those. So from programming, that's a milestone in computer music programming, but it sounded like cool dance music. And I Feel Love was also from that same era. Pete Bellot and Giorgio Moroder and the other guy, I can't remember his name. But that stuff was... I see that as listenable dance music because I'm listening to the counterpoint of the sequences, and there's all these little clocks ticking, and these gears are running and that kind of music. So it makes my brain work. It's not just a song for me. It's like wow, look at this puzzle, and all these little and loops are working, but they're not stepping on each other. And sonically, it's making a nice, pleasant piece of music. You know what I mean? So that kind of stuff I love. But at home, I listen to ambient stuff. There's a Soma FM has Drone Zone, and I just put on drone music because it's like medicine to me. It's my audio Valium.
We're the original hip-hop crew. We came to bust a jam on you. Homegirls know what it's all about. This song's for you. Homeboys break out. Homeboys rock to the vicious beat. We're gonna shake you up. We're gonna move your feet. We're gonna rock you up. We're gonna shake you out. We're gonna make you scream and make you shout.
My musical tastes are very varied. So what's in my mind? I don't know. I'm doing this thing at the Museum of Modern Art, and I'm going to put it up on iTunes after the 5th. It's kind of like, it sounds like a soundtrack for Blade Runner or Prometheus. It's this just drone music with this wild sounds, and I see music, so it's like this. Like I see a stage, or I see a concert hall, and there's a movie playing or something, and I'm scoring it. So my music is very mental. If I'm up at 6 a.m. riding my bike, I want to hear, we got to have house music all night long, some old classic or something like that. Or it's just some really cool, chill out ambient stuff,
Are you a fan of Bambaata's music and Arthur Baker's music?
Yeah. But Bambaata Bambaata rhymed that. That's Author. Author wrote that stuff. Author and John Roby. Bam came in. I remember being in the studio, and there was like an outside artist lounge, and we'd wait out there because their sessions would run over, and Bam was laying down on the couch, with his Dr. Pepper, and Arthur and John are doing the track. All right, come on, get up and do the music. All right, go inside and party people, and sip his, his Coke. Arthur was smart because he was a good street DJ and got him involved because he knew he had a following. But it wasn't like Bambaata was an artist and brought these tapes to Arthur. I think it was Arthur was doing the music and got Bam to rhyme on it. And Arthur had a shit fit from what the recording engineer told me, because I recorded this stuff on my 8-track half-inch at home. So I was really into making it sound good, right? after my stuff was mastered, the engineer on my stuff was the engineer on his stuff. He came in and he threw my album on the mixing console. He said, "You fucked me, man. How come Parrish's music sounds better than mine, the mastering, the EQ?" And he goes, "Well, Manny does a lot of the stuff." And after that, the engineer told me that they did Looking for the Perfect Beat, which was supposed to be a street battle diss record. We've got the perfect beat. You're looking for the perfect beat, and I'm supposed to be the guy that they're writing that song.
That's a beef record against you?
That's what the engineer told me. So that's a good ego, man. I mean, fuck it, yeah. Hey, you wrote that about me? I'll take it. And if it's not true, then spread the rumor. You know what I mean? But that's what I heard.
So some beef between you two a little bit.
I never had the beef.
Have you ever worked together?
Well, yeah, he did. What was it? Beat Street was the movie. We did some work on it, and we were kind of locked out of the studio, and a very similar piece of music wound up in the film that may have had some tracks that I was involved in from what Roll told me. So I have no beef with him. I mean, you know, he did the 808 movie, and I think he got kind of screwed on that too, but he was promoting it at the Winter Music Conference a couple of years ago, and I flew down and, you know, helped him, and I was in the movie and all that kind of stuff. So Arthur lives in Miami. If he called me up and said, "Come on down," yeah, sure. You know, I'm too old for drama, man. You know, I got enough drama in my own head to spill it out on the sidewalk in front of other people. You know what I mean?
Who else's music do you like from that time after Arthur Baker? Let's call it. Go forward. Anybody? You know, I mentioned Nucleus. Who are the 808 people do you like?
Here's the weird shit. I wasn't into that music at that point, right?
Oh,
Nucleus
okay.
and Egyptian Lover was stuff I discovered later. Because I was a new wave dude, and I was into rock and roll. Not rock and roll, but I was into dance music and going to clubs and getting laid. You know, I wasn't getting money off of this, so I wasn't interested in competition, whose music sounds like my music. I was out of the business because I got fucked over. So all that stuff I discovered later. And I thought, wow, this stuff is cool. Who was it? The guy who did Pac Jam.
Yeah, that's the Johnson crew.
Johnson crew. So I wound up I played in Boston, and I think he's from Boston. I don't remember if he came down from the show or somehow I talked to him, and he goes, "You know, I did Pac Jam because you did Man Made," and it inspired me. And I'm like, wow.
That's Maurice, the guy that did New Kids on the Block.
Maurice Starr did that?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay. So the guy from New Kids on the Block.
Somebody told me that on the podcast. I learned that on one of the podcasts.
No, it is. It may have been New
I didn't know he rolled that deep. I'm thinking New Kids.
But that's the kind of stuff I like because, you know, there's
Johnson
music.
crew is right in the heart, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
there's music that I like, and then there's quirky music like Kraftwerk and Pac Jam. I like that kind of stuff because it's just different. It catches your attention. If I'm listening to the radio, you know, music can become background music because that singer back then sounds like the same singer back then, and everybody's trying to sound like the person next to him. And then there's that one or two tracks that, like, what the fuck is that? That's so completely different. I like that kind of stuff because it makes me go, hey, what? What is that? You know what I mean? And that's the kind of stuff I focus to. I grew up very ADD, and I couldn't focus on anything, and it created a lot of problems in my life and school and all that. So if something caught my attention, it was good.
6 simple synthesizers.
6 simple synthesizers playing on the sound. 6 simple synthesizers playing all along. 6 simple synthesizers playing on the song. 6 simple synthesizers playing all along.
So that was kind of a fun. I needed to do a track. I was like, what am I going to talk about? It was tongue-in-cheek. It was silly. I didn't know how to write music, so I'm writing about my 6 little synthesizers. My album was done with 3 synthesizers. It was done with an 808 drum machine, a Prophet 1 for the bass line, because the 808 put out a little pulse, which I sing in 6 synthesizers.
That's right. Egyptian Lover talks about running an accent on it to get a certain sound.
And you program a cowbell that'll go dunk, dunk, dunk,
right.
dunk, 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 and you take the little trigger out and you put it in your synthesizer, and now your synthesizer goes bum, 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 ba-dum, and you could go bum, 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 ba-dum if you program the notes in it. And when you hit play on the drum machine, it would synchronize on your bass and your drums would be locked in together, and this is before computers. And then I'd have to go back and write another pattern in the drum machine. Now, if you look at 2 blinking lights, they'll start off together, and 30 seconds, a minute later, one light's going to be a little faster than another, and they fall out of sync. So I would use this process, lay down the drums and the bass, rewind the tape, and get that sequencer line, and then we would record 8 or 9 tracks, roll it back 2 or 3 tracks, and on track 8, where it started to go out of sync, we'd hit record again, punch in, and we would build 10 tracks, 12 tracks in bars
taking
of
the
4,
pieces
6,
that were synced.
No, we would have to record it onto the master in sync.
Oh, right. You're
So,
looping.
After 10 bars, it would go out, all right, roll it back 2 bars, 2, 3, 4, hit. Oh, shit, I didn't hit it in time. All right, roll it back again, roll it back.
It's like
2,
a pause
3,
mix.
4, bang. I didn't, all right, roll it back. Let me just micro-adjust the tempo on the machine. It's warming up. The room's getting warm, and the circuits are expanding, and the timing's off. All right, just give it a second. All right, roll it back. Okay, whew, I got through the next 4 bars, and this would take 8, 10, 12, 14 hours to do this stuff. It was done by hand.
What song are you most proud of?
Wow. I'll tell you, I hated hip-hop, bebop for a long time, and I'll tell you why. I grew up in rock and roll. I grew up with dance and new age disco because that's what new wave. Hip-hop, bebop was an experimental piece of music, and we had dog barking. We had no chorus, no verse, no bridge. And when they wanted to put it out, I thought a song like Together Again, because it was a pop tune, would be up there.
That one sounded sort of campy.
Yeah, but I thought it'd be more like, maybe it would be like a Human League song or something like that, and I'd be some synth pop dude. You know what I mean? So hip-hop, bebop, they said, we're putting it out. I said, you're not putting that out. They go, what do you mean? There's no chorus, there's no verse. We couldn't make heads or tails, so we took 3 rolls of 12-inch tape, we put a roll of tape on, just hit recording, and we were just shutting off and turning off on tracks and all these little pieces. And then they went back over a weekend and they did MDA, which is, coke, heroin, acid, and Quaaludes all into one powder, and they would chop it up with a razor blade, stick it up their nose, and then take the same razor blade and cut, and it's tapes, to make the beats match. And that's how hip hop bebop was put together. And when they played it for me, I said, "What the fuck is this?" All right, well, it'll just be a filler track. And when they said it's taken off, I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean it's taken off? There's dog barking. How do I go on stage? I can't. Hey ho, that's stupid. What, you're gonna look like an idiot? No, don't worry, man. Everybody's loving it. It's really cool. So I'm proud of hip hop bebop now, but for the longest time I would cringe. Man-Made was my favorite back then. Now I'm proud of. I did a piece of music with 200-piece orchestra and a 200-piece choir.
What's it called?
The Wait, W-A-I-T, not the W-E-I-G-H-T, which would have been more appropriate for me. But I managed to do a piece of serious kind of music, but it's ambient. It's ambient music, but it's kind of like I'm proud of that. I'm proud of hip hop bebop now, and I still listen to Boogie Down Bronx and wonder. It's like, how did I do that? I go back and I listen to it.
I love that shit. I love it, man.
That was a track that we did in John Carter. I lived in a white neighborhood, and John, his dad was the superintendent in the building around the corner. And he would sit on my doorstep, and I'd come home, put my car in the driveway, and come out and walk upstairs and your man Parrish and Cool Raul, cool and the one. I'm like, hey bro, what's up? You know what I mean? And they'd be like, all right, here's that guy again sitting on like, hanging out. And then we did Boogie Down Bronx. And I said, do we want to put a rhyme on this? Yeah. What about that kid downstairs? I said, all right, you know what, Raul? You go talk to him. He came up. I think we gave him $100. He took it, did it in 2 takes. And then he came out and did shows with me, and I would pay him. I paid him on my shows, but he never got paid on that record either. And in fact, it fucked him up so bad he lost his voice. And he was talking like this. He
still sort of talks like that, right?
Well, because it's like hysterical blindness. He had hysterical.
Is that what DMC? Run-DMC got the DMC got the same thing.
Yeah, you're so. You want to know what happened to that guy in the music business? Like, man, that group was so cool. What happened? They got screwed,
right?
And that's why they stopped doing it. And that's why this is such a fucking shame. And it's worse now because there's no money. You can't sell records. The only way you could do stuff is if you go out on tour. But if you don't have $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to put all your stuff in, in a semi truck and go rent, you pay for. When you go see somebody at a small theater, the theater doesn't invite you. You rent that out for $10,000, $20,000 for the night, and you have to sell enough seats, hopefully, that you pay that, have enough money left over to pay the band, pay for the gas, pay for the lighting rig, and then have some money left over to pay your rent. It's a big risk. So if you're selling lots and lots and lots of records, it's kind of guaranteed. Egyptian Lover does clubs because he doesn't have to pay all that stuff and can still play live, and they give him a couple of grand. To me, that's a pain in the ass to do. It's not worth the couple of grand because it'll take me months, and I won't do it myself. I'll have people to pay. So am I going to fly across the world for 6 hours to play in a club in London? They'll give me $2,000, and it's cost me $3,000 to get there and pay the people who are on stage with me. At that point, it's like, I'm too old for that shit. If I was a 20-year-old, hey, let's put on a show. Now I'm like, I would love to go on a proper tour. But I don't have $100,000 for rehearsals, lighting design, video development, that video wall. Those are like $50,000. I don't have that kind of money. So it's I'm not selling enough records to finance it, But I'm streaming all over the fucking place. So go listen to my music and let me get my 0.00025 cents. At that point, just steal it.
Where would you prefer people to listen to your music at? What's the best place for them to catch you monetarily? Is there one?
No, there is none. I mean, if you buy an album, great, but I'm not stupid. People don't buy. Look, do you want to spend? I did a double album, and I did it to sound like old 80s stuff. I did high energy music. I did old school hip hop. I just put it out. It's called Star. It's got Steve Strange from Visage. It's got Steve Bronski from Bronski Beat. It's got one of the guys from the Village People because I work with them. It's got a bunch of old school people, on it and stuff. I made it sound like the 80s. You'd be like, oh, this must be tracks from 1980. Like, no, I recreated that with all these vintage synthesizers and stuff. So it's a new album. It's what, $19.95 for a double album? No one's buying it. Wait, would you buy it? When was the last time you bought an album? Probably never. You know what I mean? So
I'm in radio, so no, I've everything's always been there. I've been in record pools since I was a young
So
mobile
if you're
job.
a DJ, you get it. And if you're a smart dude, you go to, a Pirate Bay and you download it. Who pays for records anymore? Nobody does. In fact, a lot of people give out their records at concerts because now they can climb the chart because they physically put their record in 100,000 people's hands. I remember I sold 5 million records, and that wasn't a lot because people doing 100 million records. Now, I years ago, like Madonna did 450,000 records, and that was considered a lot because nobody buys. Now it's like nobody buys anything. So get it where you can get it. Steal it, stream it, you know what I mean? Listen to it. It's more about my legacy now than it is making money on it. If you want to buy it and help an artist out, I would be forever grateful, and it would be great. But you're not going to buy it. You're going to stream it, and everybody's going, yeah, that's right. I ain't buying no shit. I'm like, I understand. I pay $10 a month to iTunes. That means I could
Apple
listen
Music.
Yeah, Apple Music. I could listen to 200 million songs. The Jay-Z album with Rick Rubin's came out, and I thought, well, I don't like the Jay-Z stuff, but I want to know what Rick Rubin's doing. I listened to the album 2 or 3 or 4 times, and I streamed it. They got their 0.025 cents. I went to go see Blade Runner. I was friends with Vangelis, who did the original, and went out to Greece and spent 2 weeks
Chariots
out there.
of Fire.
Yeah, well, Chariots of Fire, Blade Runner, all that kind of stuff. And 1492, the whole bunch of things that he did. He didn't do the new Blade Runner, but I got out of the movie house and thought, I want to hear that soundtrack. I got a good sound system in my car driving back, from Palm Beach to up here where I live. I listened to the movie soundtrack. So normally I would have to pay $10 or $20 to listen to Hans Zimmer's music. I streamed it. I was over it, and that's it. They're not making money on me or anybody else. You know what I mean? So
that's the biz.
Yeah, it's unfortunately where the biz is right now.
I know.
If I can get out on the road, I can make money, but I can't finance it. So it's a suck-ass place. To me, it's not about making money anymore. I do Airbnb. My condos do really well. And they pay my, my taxes and put food in my mouth. You know what I mean, and stuff like that. I'm more at my age. I'm more into my legacy, and if somebody 30 years from now in a synthesizer class in some school said, and then there was this guy, man, Parrish, who did, the godfather of electronic dance music, somebody could go somewhere on the internet or their holographic, AR headset, and see a hologram of me, bending over, showing my asshole, and music's coming out of it. At least I've accomplished something, Or I die in obscurity, whatever. But at least it's more about my legacy, trying to get as much music, as much varied kind of music that I do all out there, and the rest is for people. Either it's good or it's not, Give me my little corner of the internet, and let me just pack rat it with everything that I do musically. And you like it, you don't, hit skip and go to the next track. Someone will like it. And that's where my head's at.
Man, what a great interview. I appreciate you being with me here on the Old School Rewind. That right there is Man Parrish. But do not call him by all 3 of his names, or he will get
what, bitch? Or do I know something?
No, your name, the scratch in the chalkboard. Don't do it.
Oh, Manuel Joseph Parrish. Yeah, fuck that, man. I've been called everything. And some names that are.
You crazy sumbitch.
Yeah. You know what? I'm broken. I'm damaged. I'm crazy. But my book is all about survival.
Tell us about the book. Oh, that's right. Let's talk about the book.
I'm writing a book. I have a lot of great stories. Like, Madonna was my opening act. She hid my clothes when we did Studio 54 because she wanted to go on first. I testified against the mafia when I was a male prostitute because the guy that hired me that day was doing counterfeit money, and the FBI came busting through the door with their guns drawn. I flew on the Concorde. I jumped subway turnstiles on welfare. I managed village people for 6 years. My joke is, I felt like Shirley Partridge driving the bus. Shut up and get in the back and sit down for 6 years.
How'd you get to a rocket launch the other day? You know somebody in Florida. Now, you live in Florida, so that must be a Florida country.
Yeah, I'm a geek, and
No,
I go to Disney.
Oh, come on, man!
I go to Disney not to see Mickey Mouse. I go to Disney like when you're looking at the ride. I'm kind of like hanging over the side of the car and looking at the track, or I'm trying to see behind, the wires behind that animatronic, dinosaur. How are they doing that? That's where my brain goes on this shit. It's like it doesn't shut up. It's like, wait a minute, that was a dinosaur that levitated over, in 3D over the car that we're sitting in for this ride. And then I got to drill down and figure out how they do it, right? So Kennedy Space Center, I saw online. I said, I'd like to go up to Kennedy Space Center. That'd be, kind of a cool, interesting thing. And if you want to see a rocket launch, hit here. And I'm like, what? So I found out if you pay an extra $20, you can go the closest legal, which is 2 miles away from a rocket launch, because if the damn thing explodes, it'll spew flames and metal particles at the speed of light over 1.5 miles. So they want to keep you away so you don't swim. But it was so cool. I mean, in a geek kind of way. It was sunset. The sun was just going down. And they said, well, you're going to see it, and you're going to hear it, and you're going to feel it. I'm like, yeah, feel it, right. this thing goes off, and of course you're getting the rush. And then all of a sudden, like they talk about rolling thunder, you kind of hear this deep bass sound, literally like coming across this body of water, rolling towards you, and it's getting louder and louder. And then, like when you see that atomic bomb blast go off and you see that shockwave, it was like that. You don't see it, but it suddenly hits you, and you feel it in your chest, and you're looking up at this thing going off, and then it sounds like a broken speaker. It's crackling the atmosphere with so much, what is it, 15,000 pounds it's pushing down, against the earth to lift this thing up. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's such a trip. If you get a chance to be in Florida, it's $50 to get in, another $20 if they're doing launches. It's all over their website. It's a kind of a bucket list thing. I do it. It's kind of worth it. Definitely worth seeing. So I did it, and I left. Geeked out, happy. It's only an hour and a half from where I live anyway. I'm in Disney in an hour, and I'm in Miami in an hour. You know what I mean?
What's your team? Got a football team? I'm a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, even though I'm in California.
It's too butch for me. Talk to me about Project Runway. I'm a fag. You know what I mean?
Yeah. When did you know you were gay? Did you know? Were you always gay? Did you?
When I got a boner at 8 years old, you know what I mean? I'm like,
okay, right.
I'm doing the girl thing. I've got 2 fingers in her, but I'm more interested in, my friend at school. Something's wrong here. You know what I mean? I'm fingering a girl thinking about, one of the boys at school, and I'm like, hey, it's kind of fucked up. You know what I mean? It's like, and I'm a horny kid. I would, fuck girls and stuff like that. But it's like, you're fucking girls, but I'm closing my eyes thinking, I wonder what Joey looks like without his clothes on. I'm like, this is really fucked up. But then, in those days, I remember my mother one day kind of figured out I might be gay. So she's talking, we had a 2-family house, and it was so stereotypical. I had this Pan Am bag that I used to put all my stuff in, and my mother said, I think my son's a homosexual. And they were talking in the hallway, and I was listening. She goes, what do you mean your son's a homosexual? I go, well, he has one of those bags. That's how they find each other, these homosexuals. They carry these little bags, and it's a sign of homosexuality. And besides, I think he's got childbearing hips. And I thought, all right, mom knows best. I'm probably a cocksucker, you know what I mean? Not a pussy eater. So I grew up, I left home early, so it was never an issue for me. I didn't grow up with the shame. I didn't grow up with the peer pressure, but I wasn't running around sitting on fire hydrants either. You know what I mean? I was just a dude that was a freak, you know what I mean? And I met other people that were like me. I'm like, all right, I'm not just this weird person with a strange fetish. There are other people around that like to do the same kind of stuff that I do. But I am HIV negative, but I was in back rooms. I had a party called Sperm at a bar called The Cock for 15 years where famous people would come and lose their pants in the back.
That sounds gay.
Yeah, but we get a lot of girls that would come in.
I'm just fucking.
But I'm saying we get a lot of college girls that would come in. We had Christina Aguilera come in. We had Britney Spears when she was hot at the time. We had who else? A lot of Mark Arman from Soft Cell. Fashion designers, I had the hottest party in New York City because, there was a back room where they had sex, and we had nude go-go boys and nude go-go girls when it was illegal. But we kept our shit quiet. The cops knew what was going on. It was a little storefront that held 80 people legally. We put 400 people in there, and the wooden floor would bend. And I thought, oh my God, this thing's going to collapse and everybody's going to fall in, and you're going to see it on the news, and people in the corner have their pants down getting blowjobs and doing coke in the corner are going to be on top of all the people that are lying in the pile in the basement because the floor broke. So that's my army. That's my New York. You know what I mean?
And that was the time. You're
I worked
part
at
of
Hellfire,
that.
Which was a straight.
You're part of that.
Yeah, I worked at Hellfire, which was a straight S&M fetish club. I'm not into S&M, but it was a club that was directly across the street from the loft I was in on the corner of 14th and the 9th. And they gave me a job. And I worked on the door, and I was security, which I'm a big guy, 6'4". So I had Hip Hop Be Bop out already, and I was walking around in this thing, and people were like doing things you wouldn't do to a farm animal to each other, you know what I mean? And it kind of opened my eyes in a weird way, because I realized sex isn't just straight or gay or bi. There's 50 shades of gray, whatever it is. There's straight people that are 100% straight, 90% straight, and 10%, they may like guys. You know how many straight guys confide in me that they love trannies? I mean, like, a huge amount. You're gay, you know about the tranny thing. I'm like, I'm not into trannies. That's a whole different world. But you want to
everybody's lumped together, right?
Yeah, well, everybody is a snowflake. You know what I mean? Everybody has their own, just like music. I listen to ambient, I listen to electronic, I listen to dance, and I can listen to opera. Some people only dance, and some people only, country. So people's sexuality is the same way too. I've heard stories of girls telling me, "Oh yeah, I think my boyfriend's gay because I'm putting 2 fingers up his butt while he's fucking me," and I'm like, that doesn't mean he's gay. It just means he happens to like a good old-fashioned prostate massage, which I don't like, but you know what I mean. You know what I'm saying. So
I don't know what you mean.
Oh yeah, right. I would love to see your porn stash, man. Those URLs that you keep in that little folder. Yeah, I can. Midget. Was it midget porn?
No, you name it something completely different, like, baseball clips or something, right?
They say baseball clips so your girlfriend or wife can, but when you click on it, 52 triple Z titties, I got you.
You say you're not flamboyant. You're gay enough to have been in hip-hop early on. Did it hinder you in any way?
No, because when we did shows, I played at a place in Newark, New Jersey. Newark, New Jersey, there are 4 white people in the whole town. And here comes Cracker and his 2 dudes with glitter makeup. And we had graffiti plastic vinyl jackets. I'm in my Darth Vader outfit. And they had skirts from the waist down that would spin and turn. And then we would throw glitter all over the audience. So the song starts, I think we did Man-Made first. It's dark on stage. The smoke's coming out. There's a tiny pin spot. And these 2 guys come out and pull the hood off of me. And here I am, the dude that's do hip-hop. And I've got eye makeup on, lipstick, and spray paint of glitter makeup spray paint. And I look like a fucking glam robot in the middle of Kango Fila, yo, what's up, my nigga, club. And they stopped, and I stopped. I thought, I'm going to get killed. And they're like, ooh, yeah. So it's like my sexuality, because I didn't have to fight, wasn't like, I'm gay, I'm proud, say it loud. I like shit, and if you don't like it, great. I don't like what you do, you don't like what I do, so we don't have to do it to each other. But, if you're not paying my rent, fuck you. I don't give a fuck. If you judge me on my sexuality, that's your issue. You know what I mean? I grew up with people, when I was 14 years old, I grew up with 30-year-olds, and back in the early 70s, those were hippies. So I learned peace, love, and all that kind of crap. And then when I got bored of that, I learned pull your pants down, stick it in. As an 18-year-old with no limits, So I lived a lot, but it kind of comes full circle to where, like, you as long as it's not children or animals, or you're not forcing somebody to do what you want to do. You like to take pictures of your dick and show it to girls or guys. Okay, cool, fine. If they like looking at it, I don't give a. Who cares, So I learned that people's sexuality is their sexuality, and it helped me with mine. You judge me, fine, whatever. And hip hop was a very hard thing for people. I mean, rhyme, because if you're gay, you don't do hip hop. But I won't say their names, but I know some big names in hip hop. And Bambaataa got accused of something.
That's what I was going to ask you. I wasn't going to ask you during the podcast.
Oh, listen, you could anything I tell you, you could broadcast.
No. I realize that.
You could broadcast that, and it's very interesting.
It seems surprising. The Bambaataa thing seems surprising, but then what the fuck is surprising?
I don't know if it's true, and if it was. Back then.
Hey, wouldn't you have known?
he had outfits on and I had outfits on and everybody else had filas. And so there was always that guy or that MILF in the neighborhood that fucked all the young guys, or some dude that was luring guys up to their apartment. It was like, yeah, that's what's in the neighborhood. You know, that's part of the Mr. Rogers neighborhood. People didn't freak out. And you could publish all this stuff. People didn't freak out like they freak out now with, Harvey Weinstein showed me his penis. Well, you know, when we grew up,
people have been doing that for
I mean,
years.
shit. I was like, what do you mean? I don't have to have sex with you to get a record deal? You're cute. I was kind of hoping I had to. You know what I mean? Because then I'd be having sex with the president, and I can do whatever I want. I want a limousine. You know what I mean? We had sex. You know. So in those days, it was. It's a lot. It's getting really bad now. I mean, obviously, not children, not animals, not forcing somebody, not hurting anybody, but. You're a freak, somebody's a freak. Hey, Freak Fest, be happy. And if you don't, that's when people take guns and blow other people away because they're frustrated mentally, physically, and sexually. You know what I mean? I grew up in an era of New York City that had sex clubs, straight clubs, gay clubs, all that kind of stuff, and people went in the back and got off. It was peaceful. The only crime came from crack. Now people are blowing people's heads off because they can't get laid or they can't fall in love or they're gay or straight or some sort of a weird thing that they were told was bad, and they sit and they think about it and isolate and blow up. You know what I mean? So I grew up in the middle of sexual revolution, and I was free. I didn't care what people thought of me. I lived in Manhattan. I lived in a... I was a needle in a haystack of thousands of other people that left the Midwest and came to New York because nobody judged you. If I had purple hair, and I didn't wear purple hair in a skirt because I was gay. I wear purple hair in a skirt because I wanted to purposely be a freak, you know, like a punk, you know what I mean, kind of thing. So to me, I was free, and if somebody judged me, I was uncomfortable going home to Brooklyn because my friends in Brooklyn judged me, and my good friends that I knew all my life, you know, oh man, you're a fucking fag, fuck you, I can't, like, I'm not sticking my dick in you. What are we talking about here? Yeah, but you're gay, so I can't be your friend. I'm like, okay. Then I had a record out, and people would call me up, hey, you remember me? And I'm like, yeah, I remember you. You're the guy who called me a fag and told me you couldn't be my friend. I remember you. Click. Oh, come on, man. Come on, can we hang out and go to some club and meet Prince? I'm like, even if I did, you know what I mean? When I needed you, you weren't there, so go fuck yourself, you know? So I was lucky.
I love it.
Yep.
I love that, man. You got a great story, and I love who you are, man.
Hey, listen, I love music. I love sex. I'm not a pervert. I don't wear a raincoat in the back of a movie theater, but I could, you know, if I wanted to. But I don't. You know, it took me a long time. I went through mental abuse to get my head together, and I suffered because of stuff my mom, schizophrenic, did to me, and being fucked in the music business. I suffer from panic disorder and all that kind of stuff. But I'm a survivor. I'm not taking Prozac. I'm not self-medicating with, opiates. I'm not a junkie. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm still standing, broken, damaged, a little fucked up, but I'm still here, and I can think on my own and kind of, get through life. So, that's what my story's about in my book. It's about, holy shit, you did that and that and that, and wow, that, oh my God, wow. And you're not in. When I had panic attacks, my shrink said, people like you either killed themselves or in straitjackets in mental institutions or alcoholics or junkies. The fact that you're none of that means you're really strong and you pulled through this. So that's my story.
Congrats.
I'm a survivor.
I'm a survivor. Hey, right there.
All right, dude, there you go.
One of the originators of hip-hop dance, that's Man Parrish right there.
Hey,
Thank
that's
you for
me.
being on the podcast.
Yeah, you can get me at manparrish.com. I'm on Facebook, Man Parrish Artist. I have a Twitter
Where do they buy
thing.
the book, and what's it called?
Legendary. Drag queens are called legend. See, I love jokes, right? So drag queens are called legendary because they're supposed to be so amazing that they're just legendary. So I've taken the word legendary, and not from music. It's sort of like this pun on drag queens, you know what I mean? So it's my tongue-in-cheek, my sick sense of humor. So Man Parrish, legendary. He's super fag, but yet, the guy who did hip-hop. So it's kind of like my inside joke.
That guy rocks the 808, I know that much.
Yeah, rocks the 808 and,
a ball bag and an 808. Hey,
there
man,
you go.
I appreciate you, brother.
Dude,
Seriously.
thank you so much. It was a lot of fun. I'm clapping, and my dog's barking. He's happy, too.
We came to bust a jam on you. Homegirls know what it's all about. This song's for you. Homeboys break out. Homeboys rock to the vicious beat. We're gonna shake you up. We're gonna move your feet. We're gonna rock you up. We're gonna shake you out. We're gonna make you scream and make you shout.
You've been listening to the Old School Rewind with Randy Bubba Black. Share and subscribe now at oldschoolrewind.com.